and welcome to the December 2010 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 2 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of inquiry concerning the transition from the current voice-only 911 system to a broadband-enabled next-generation 911 system. Second, you will consider a report and order adopting basic rules of the road to preserve the open internet as a platform for innovation, investment, competition, and free expression. This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Rear Admiral Jamie Barnett, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Admiral Barnett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau is pleased to present to you today a notice of inquiry that was recommended in the National Broadband Plan and announced as part of the 2010 Broadband Action Plan agenda. This notice of inquiry will initiate a comprehensive proceeding to examine how the deployment of a broadband-enabled, IP-based, next-generation 911 network can harness the life-saving potential of text, photo, and video in emergencies. In the communications industry, technological innovation has ushered in an era of advanced IP-based devices and applications that have vastly enhanced the ability of the public to communicate. At the same time, our legacy circuit switch 911 system is unable to accommodate the capabilities embedded in many of these advanced technologies, such as the ability to transmit and receive photos, text messages, and video. Accordingly, this notice of inquiry seeks to gain a better understanding of how the gap between the capabilities of modern networks and devices and today's 911 system can be bridged. This notice of inquiry also seeks to ensure that individuals with disabilities and special needs receive the appropriate benefits from the next generation 911 system. Joining me here at the table, all the way at my left, is Dr. Henning Schulz-Rennie, our engineering fellow, visiting to us for this semester and next semester from Columbia University. Next to him, David Firth, our Deputy Bureau Chief on Public Safety. And then Patrick Donovan, who has been our lead attorney on the 911 things. And then to my right, Laurie Flaherty from the Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. She's been a lead and a great partner with us on that. I'd also would like to acknowledge the team in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau that worked so diligently on this item, including Erica Olson, Tom Beers, David Seal, and Aaron Garza. In addition, I'd like to thank the Office of Engineering and Technology, the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, the Office of General Counsel, the Wireline Competition Bureau, and the Wireless Bureau for their assistance. I would also like to thank Jeff Cohen, who is seated in the audience here with us today. Jeff is a valued member of our 911 team and is now temporarily detailed to the Democratic staff of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He has been essential in all of our 911 things, including the location accuracy that we did earlier this year. Also seated behind me are representatives from APCO, NENA, and the E911 Institute, who have been working diligently for many years to further the transition to next generation 911. Bill Caro, the president of APCO, was going to be here today but is sick, but he has been able to send in his place Terry Hall, and if you guys would raise your hand so they'll know who you are, the second vice president of APCO. Yusel Ors, the director of governmental affairs. From NENA, we have Steve O'Connor, the president, Brian Fonts, the CEO, and Trey Fogarty, the Director of Governmental Affairs. And we also welcome Greg Rohde, Executive Director of the E911 Institute. And we look forward to partnering with all of these organizations as we go forward. Before we present the notice, I've asked Laurie Flaherty to say a few words about NHTSA's role with respect to Next Generation 911 as it relates to today's item. The Commission has worked extensively with NHTSA on 911 issues in the past, and today's notice builds upon that work that Laurie and her team have done to map out many of the technical elements of the Next Generation 911 platforms. We expect to continue to work closely and to have a close working relationship with them as we move forward. Laurie?
Thank you, Admiral. And thank you for the invitation to participate this morning. I appreciate it. I do have one slide that is the basis of just a very short presentation this morning. The graphic on this slide represents the three major components of the emergency communications system. In order to respond to any emergency, regardless of what kind it is, all three of those components need to cooperate and coordinate, work together to provide a response for an emergency. The first component is the public access, and obviously the FCC has jurisdiction with regard to this area. In the middle is 911, which is the hub of that emergency communications system. That is the world that I live in. At the DOT, we administer a grant program specifically for 911 call centers. We also fund projects of national significance to support and promote 911 services, particularly the local and state 911 authorities. And we also have developed a consensus design for the next generation of 911, and that was developed as a result of a DOT initiative entitled the Next Generation 911 Initiative. Moving forward, just as these components work together at the local level, it makes sense for us at the federal level to coordinate our efforts. In moving forward, the activities of the National 911 program are complemented by what the FCC does, and often we're able to build off of each other's success. So moving forward, it is our intention to continue working with the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and we thank you and we thank them for their support in moving forward with supporting and promoting 911 services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. And now, with your permission, Patrick Donovan will now present the notice of inquiry on behalf of the Bureau. Patrick.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you today represents a first step in bridging the gap between the capabilities of modern networks and devices and today's 911 system. The NOI seeks comment on 5 distinct groups of issues. First, the NOI requests comment on the capabilities that Next Generation 911 could provide to the public. Next Generation 911 architecture is IP-based and has the potential to support a variety of non-voice communications applications, or media types, such as message-based text, real-time text, photos, and video. The NOI seeks comment on these media types, as well as what media types persons with disabilities and non-English speakers will likely use to make an emergency call in a next-generation 911 environment. Second, the NOI examines the next-generation 911 network architecture. In an IP-based 911 architecture, a variety of protocols can be used to transport media types across the network. The NOI seeks comment on the mechanisms that should be used to transport content across the network, whether there is a need to develop standards, and if so, what entity should set and update those standards. Third, the NOI seeks comment on other specialized next-generation 911 applications. For example, emergency calls will be able to be placed not only by individuals, but by automatically triggered devices. Examples of such devices include environmental sensors, highway cameras, security cameras, alarms, personal medical devices, telematics, and consumer electronics in automobiles. The NOI seeks comment on how the deployment of Next Generation 911 will facilitate these device-initiated emergency services. The NOI also examines whether there is a need to modify existing laws, regulations, or tariffs to ensure that these devices have access to the Next Generation 911 network. The deployment of Next Generation 911 also has the potential to provide additional data to public safety answering points and first responders, such as the caller's medical history or a description of the caller's residence or business location. To that end, the NOI seeks comment on issues related to the provision of this additional data. Fourth, the NOI seeks comment on matters related to the transition to Next Generation 911. Since the transition to Next Generation 911 is likely to be gradual, the NOI examines what can be done to ensure that Next Generation 911 networks interoperate seamlessly with legacy 911 networks throughout the transition. Additionally, the NOI seeks comment on other transition-related issues, such as liability, privacy, and security concerns, consumer education, and location capabilities in a next-generation 911 environment. Fifth, the NOI seeks comment on the extent of the FCC's jurisdiction and the role that states and other federal agencies should play during the transition to next-generation 911. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Admiral, thank you very much. Commissioner McDowell. Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Cobbs.
Commissioner Cobbs.
Thanks for the promotion. I'm now the senior Democrat.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Admiral, and your team, and thank you, Ms. Flaherty, for being with us today, and for the really productive working relationship we have with your agency. And I especially noted the last part of your presentation where you talk about the need to cooperate with not just federal agencies but state agencies too, and that's so important really in whatever we do. The safety of the people, as you have heard me say many times before, is always the first obligation of the public servant, so we are true to that today. And in point of fact, though, the challenge in this item is not all that different from the other item on our Commission's agenda today: how to take a system that was designed for the world of voice telephony and ensure that it keeps pace with our 21st century communications networks. Better promoting the safety and protection of the American people today means, in large measure, realizing and applying the potential of these new and quickly evolving technologies. Each year, 240 million 911 calls are made, I am told. Although service is available in 99% of the U.S. population, availability is not the same thing as maximizing viability and effectiveness and convenience. So I welcome the fact that today we ask important questions about how to enhance the depth and breadth of information communicated in an emergency situation. Next Generation 911 is all about thinking beyond traditional voice communications, and that includes the potential for transmitting texts and photos and video, and it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to realize how bringing this to reality can improve public safety and improve personal safety too. But it will require a great deal of focus and a lot of hard work to ensure the transition to IP-based communications technologies. And to make it as seamless as possible will require real skill and dedication at all levels of government policy and working with all levels of public safety. But we know it's worth it because we know NG 911 tools will save lives. This NOI also begins to fulfill one of our responsibilities under the recently enacted 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, a wonderful piece of legislation, part of which directed the FCC to enable Next Generation 911 access for individuals with disabilities. This NOI asks important questions about how emergency communication can take into account the needs of individuals with hearing disabilities or speech disabilities. It's just one of many proceedings where I hope we will think creatively about how to ensure that people with disabilities can be full participants in our society and also be entitled to its full protections. So I commend the Chairman for bringing this important item to the full Commission for consideration. I want to thank the staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for working their way through this analysis. I'm especially grateful for the work and the presence here today of folks from NENA and APCO and the 911 Institute. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the immense contribution you have made to the success of this item, and I look forward to working with all of you as we continue to strengthen our requirements and capabilities for emergency communications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Cobbs. Now, Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to support this notice of inquiry. I look forward to gaining a better understanding of how best to meet consumer expectations through study of the gaps between today's antiquated 911 system and current advanced broadband capabilities. In particular, I'd like to learn more about possible avenues for local public safety agencies to obtain funding to upgrade systems and pay for technological education. While I understand that this is not within the Commission's purview, it is a critical component of the solution, and thus must be part of our discussion. Many thanks to the staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for your work and creativity. I also want to acknowledge Brian Fonts and his team at NENA. You are an invaluable resource to us, and we appreciate your counsel and expertise. And I look forward to working with everyone who's interested in this matter as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you would allow, I have a couple of questions before. Please. Thank you for being so gracious. Ms. Flaherty, welcome. Wanted to ask you, the broadband plan, as you know, recommended that NHTSA should prepare a report to identify costs of deploying a nationwide NG 911 system. Would you share with us the status of that report?
Sure. The report recommended in Chapter 16 of the National Broadband Plan is significant, both in its breadth and depth. And to be honest, we don't have the resources to complete that report. We are, however, developing a cost estimate for that report. It will be completed within the next couple of months.
Okay. Is there anything that the FCC could do to ensure that the funding needs are met? Do you have any ideas from that perspective?
Well, we submitted a migration plan to Congress last year, and there were three things in that report that were recommended. One is funding, a consistent source of funding. Second was a complete list of technical standards, and third is coordination. So to the extent that the FCC can use its influence and its jurisdiction for any one of those, that would be extremely helpful, and we'd be happy to help you in that regard.
Thank you. And Admiral, good morning, and thank you for your presentation. In the order we adopted this past September regarding wireless E911 location accuracy requirements, industry cooperation was instrumental in helping the Commission adopt standards that would help PSAPs do their job and would help improve this nation's emergency communications. In your opinion, how important is similar industry cooperation to a successful implementation of NG 911 networks?
Commissioner, working within, this is going to be a team effort. We have to work with other federal, state, local partners. We have to work with industry, and this is one of the things that we considered in developing the NOI. And particularly, I might refer to David Firth, our Deputy Bureau Chief. Can you respond to that with regard to some of the things that we went into with regard to making sure that we have industry cooperation?
Sure. Well, as Commissioner, as you're well aware, when we're talking about next generation 911 architecture, we're talking about a more complex fabric of both industry and public sector participants in the architecture than we have with legacy 911. So one of the things that we do at some length in the notice is ask questions to try to understand the relationships between all of these different players. And we're certainly going to seek out opportunities to bring industry together with the 911 community to look for areas of consensus. And in fact, beyond just putting out the notice and waiting for comments, we intend to be proactive and actually invite industry and other stakeholders in for on-the-record meetings as we build the record in this proceeding so that we can identify those issues. And that will help us to focus on and narrow down the problems that we need to address in further proceedings in this docket. So I think that taking that step of bringing the community in, bringing stakeholders, both traditional and non-traditional, in, and looking for those areas will help us to maximize the potential for consensus.
Thank you for the engagement, and now I'll get back on script. If constructed correctly, next generation or NG 911 networks should be a vast improvement over our legacy system. These new networks will give consumers the ability to communicate emergency messages through more media platforms than are possible today. Additionally, they will offer the ability to include more information when sending emergency communications. NG 911 networks will also give public safety entities more options for finding a person in an emergency and will provide continued improvements in location accuracy over the current system. This is not just an opportunity to solve past problems, but also a chance to design and construct state-of-the-art emergency communications networks that make the most of the benefits IP technologies have to offer. There are a number of important differences between NG 911 networks and its predecessors. NG 911 can be accessible by a wide variety of end users and devices, many of which will have identifiers other than telephone numbers. More than one entity will be able to provide network access and communication services. As the notice of inquiry explains, however, while these differences offer advantages in emergency communications, they also present challenges in ensuring a successful migration to NG 911 networks. There are two main reasons why I'm optimistic, however, that we will successfully meet these challenges. First, a number of relevant stakeholders have already demonstrated that they understand that successful implementation of this policy will take collaboration and consensus. In fact, when it enacted the New and Emerging Technologies Act of 2008, Congress recognized the importance of such collaboration by creating the National E911 Implementation Coordination Office. ICO plays an instrumental role by developing a national plan for migrating to this new IP-enabled emergency network by consulting with the public safety, community groups representing people with disabilities, technology developers, and communications providers. Ms. Flaherty has reaffirmed the value of ongoing interagency coordination. I was also pleased to see that NENA, IETF, and others have been actively engaged in developing and harmonizing technical standards to support the IP-based solutions that will be necessary to make the migration to NG 911 a success. I urge all relevant private and public entities to continue such collaboration. The second reason for my optimism is that this notice properly embarks the Commission and our industry on a comprehensive examination of the relevant technological, economic, and institutional issues raised by this proceeding. I was particularly pleased to see that the notice seeks to ensure that the concerns of all people with special needs, those living with disabilities, and non-English speaking persons are included in the design of these new networks. The notice recognizes that there will be significant cost to constructing these networks and asks a number of questions to elicit creative approaches to addressing these costs. It is also important, as the notice points out, to consider the cyber security ramifications of these new networks. I join you in commending Admiral Barnett and his staff at the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for initiating this proceeding with an excellent and thorough notice of inquiry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Clyburn, thank you. Commissioner Baker.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that we are beginning to move down the path forward of some of the recommendations on the National Broadband Plan regarding the next generation 911 deployment. The need to incorporate state-of-the-art technologies into emergency communications is something upon which we can all agree. Today's notice of inquiry is a thoughtful starting point for our work to ensure that the public safety communications capabilities meet the public's legitimate expectations and requirements. I look forward to receiving and reviewing all of the comments. As we proceed, I will throw a cautionary note that I hope that we will continue to be mindful of the statutory limits of our authority here at the FCC. In addition to these challenging economic times, we can't lose sight of the costs that are required for technology upgrades. I would hate to see the unaffordable better trump the attainable good, thus putting the needed innovation effectively out of reach. I know several of you have worked with you guys for so long. We've come a long way. We have a long way still to go. But I appreciate certainly Admiral Barnett's leadership. Ms. Flaherty, I appreciate your being here. Our friends and experts, all of your input, NENA, APCO, E911 Institute, National E911 Implementation Coordination Office. We really appreciate your help. I'm sorry that we consider your NOI in the shadow of the net neutrality debate. It's important on its own right, and you deserve your day in the sun. So we support you. This is a great area for consensus, and look forward to further implementation.
Thank you. Admiral Barnett, team, Lori Flaherty, I'm so pleased that NHTSA is here. You're not the first person from another agency to participate in our commission meetings in this way. And I think that's a good thing. What we've shown is our desire, our willingness, our recognition of the need that we work together with other agencies of the government on these horizontal issues where we do need to work together in order to deliver to the public the benefits that can come from the next generation of communications technologies. This is such a perfect example, and we very much appreciate you taking the time here, which I know is the tip of the iceberg for the kind of work that you and others are putting in with our terrific team to make this vision a reality. The proceeding that we're launching today to modernize our 911 system is a very important proceeding, and it fulfills yet another recommendation of the National Broadband Plan, which laid out, as you've heard from some of my colleagues, a vision for next generation 911 that harnesses cutting-edge technologies to save lives. Thanks to the outstanding job that our first responders and everyone who participates in 911 operations do every day, our current 911 system provides an incredibly valuable service, handling more than 650,000 calls every day, over 240 million calls a year, increasingly using better and better technology. It's an incredible thing. I've been honored to visit to 911 Operations Center, and it's just an incredible thing to see. But today's 911 system doesn't support the communications tools of tomorrow. Many 911 call centers don't have broadband. Some are in communities where broadband isn't even available. And today's 911 system doesn't effectively take advantage of the proliferation of mobile technology. More than 2/3, almost 70% of 911 calls are made from mobile phones. 2/3, a lot of people don't know that. That's why the Commission recently moved to make location accuracy requirements more stringent for wireless service providers. As we discussed when we launched that proceeding, too many mobile 911 calls don't provide accurate location information to responders. So that remains a very important initiative of the Commission. We continue to work with other agencies to develop information and resources to help people understand how they can best protect themselves, how they can best help responders when they're in areas where a mobile 911 call is unlikely to provide an accurate location. But even beyond that, there's much more we can do to seize the opportunities of mobile technologies for 911. As we all know, consumers are increasingly using their phones for texting. If we didn't know these ourselves, we can just consult my 19-year-old son. And yet, even though mobile phones are the device used by most 911 calls, right now, you can't text 911. And we haven't done the survey, but I bet you if we surveyed most people who are using mobile phones and using texting and asked them if they thought a text to 911 would work, they would give the wrong answer. So let me repeat this. This is really important. If you find yourself in an emergency situation today and want to send a text for help, you can pretty much text anyone except a 911 call center. The Virginia Tech campus shootings in 2007 are a tragic, real-life reminder of the technological limitations that 911 is now saddled with. Some students and witnesses, you may have read this at the time, tried to text 911 during that emergency. Some of them thought they were texting 911 during that emergency, but the text never went through, never received by the local 911 dispatchers. It's time to bring 911 into the digital age. Broadband-enabled, next-generation 911 will revolutionize emergency response. It'll enable texting. It'll enable photos and video. It will incorporate data. All of this will improve situational awareness for first responders, rapid response for first responders, and save lives. I spoke about how Next-Gen 911 could have helped at Virginia Tech. That kind of service could also help people in other emergency situations where speaking with a 911 dispatcher could jeopardize their life or safety. You can imagine situations where you'd like to be able to just press some buttons instead of talking on a phone. Hostage situation. It could help people with disabilities, for example, allowing a deaf person to communicate with an emergency call center by sending text messages. It's easy to see how sending photos or video to 911 emergency centers could have tremendous benefits. Imagine a caller transmitting to first responders a photo of a car leaving the scene of an armed robbery. Next Generation 911 will also allow emergency calls to be placed by devices in addition to human beings. Devices like environmental sensors capable of detecting chemicals, or highway cameras, security cameras, alarms, personal medical devices, consumer electronics and automobiles. The benefits, the real-world practical benefits of new technologies applied to 911 are clear, and so is the need for action. Now, the reality is that modernizing 911 raises complex challenges, costly challenges that will not only take time and money, but also significant coordination. That's one of the reasons why, again, I'm so glad that you're here. It's why I'm so glad that others are here in the audience today who are part of the community seeking in the government, federal government, local, state, and local government, private sector, seeking to make this a reality. Because we need the help of our federal, state, and local partners, public safety, lawmakers, communications and broadband service providers, equipment manufacturers. All these players have to come together for us to deliver next generation 911. Last month, as we were working on preparing this notice, I visited the Arlington County Emergency Communications Center, 911 Dispatch Center in Arlington, and was very pleased to hear the enthusiasm among the officers I spoke with for embracing new technology as part of 911. That's not the gating factor. The desire and the willingness to work together is there. The level of knowledge and sophistication is there, and to the extent it's not, there's a real embrace of learning new technologies that can save lives. Our first responders want access to every communications technology that can help them save lives, and I'm committed, and the FCC is committed, to meeting this challenge head-on and playing a strong role in accelerating the implementation of Next Gen 911. We can't do it alone, as we've all said. The NOI that we are adopting today starts an important process to ensure there's a consistent regulatory framework for states and local governments as this new technology is deployed. These efforts, coupled with the efforts of NHTSA and Congress to ensure funding for this important endeavor, will ensure that NG 911 becomes a reality throughout the nation. Let me again thank NHTSA. I mentioned Nina and APCO, Brian Fonce. Let me join my colleagues in thanking you. I don't want to leave anyone out. I thank all of you who've participated in this and will participate in this in the future. I encourage all key constituencies to work with us. It's the only way we'll get this done. 911, again, it's an indispensable, life-saving tool. Broadband can make it even better. That's what our National Broadband Plan said. The technology is there. The question is, will we be able to harness that technology to revolutionize America's 911 system? I look forward with working with our colleagues here at the Commission, with all the constituencies I mentioned, with Congress, to get this done for the American people. So thank you again, Admiral Barnett, all of you at the table, and all of you who've worked on this item. We appreciate it very much. It is indeed a very important item, and it begins a very important proceeding. With that, unless there's any more discussion, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. So ordered, and the request for editorial privileges is granted. Madam Secretary, thank you very much to all of you. Please announce the next item on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the second item on your agenda will be presented jointly by the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. It is entitled Preserving the Open Internet, Broadband Industry Practices.
Commissioners.
Sharon Gillette, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Today we're pleased to present a proposed order to preserve the open internet. As my colleagues and I will explain, this order would establish 3 basic rules to preserve the open internet. They are transparency, no blocking, and no unreasonable discrimination. These straightforward rules are grounded in broadly accepted Internet principles and tailored to differing technologies. Collectively, they protect and empower consumers and innovators, help ensure that the Internet continues to flourish as an engine of commerce, creativity, and civic engagement, and provide clarity for broadband providers. By ensuring that no one controls access to the Internet, they cement the credibility of the United States as we continue to advocate for other nations to let the open Internet flourish within their own borders. Seated with me this morning in the order in which they will present are David Tannenbaum, Special Counsel in the Office of General Counsel, who will explain how the proposed order is grounded in Commission precedent and long-standing principles of Internet openness. Paul Dessau, Chief of the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis, who will explain how the order would promote investment and innovation. Ruth Milkman, Chief of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, who will explain how the rules would apply to mobile broadband services, and Austin Schlick, the Commission's General Counsel, who will discuss enforcement and the Commission's legal authority. The draft before you is the product of extraordinary efforts by bureaus and offices across the entire Commission. Time does not permit me to mention by name the dozens of talented and dedicated staff who contributed, but please know that this draft reflects a tremendous amount of hard work from some very special people who are listed on the screen.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, as you know, the Commission has long recognized that open communications networks spur innovation and investment to the benefit of consumers, competition, and economic growth. Over the course of many years, in many contexts, and especially through a series of decisions over the last 5 years, the Commission has maintained its commitment to the openness that facilitated the birth and the incredible growth of the Internet. In 2005, the Commission unanimously adopted an Internet policy statement that sought to protect the rights of consumers to access the lawful Internet content of their choice, and the freedom to use the applications, services, and devices of their choosing, subject to reasonable network management. The Commission later made these principles enforceable in the context of telephone company mergers, as well as in the 700 megahertz C-block spectrum auction. The Commission adopted these measures with a shared understanding that its authority and statutory obligations extend to ensuring open broadband networks. And these measures reflected long-standing principles of openness on Internet access networks, principles that are the foundation upon which the Internet was built. Entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators depend on these principles, and major broadband providers have committed publicly to preserving the Internet's openness. At the same time, however, there have been incidents, some of which have led to Commission action, where broadband providers have blocked or degraded lawful Internet traffic without disclosing their actions to consumers. The rules proposed in the order before you are consistent with the Commission's history of protecting the Internet's openness from such threats.
Since 1995, venture capital funds have invested almost $250 billion in Internet-related industries. The historical openness of the Internet that David has just described has made this massive investment possible by eliminating barriers to innovation and by giving even the smallest businesses access to national and global markets. Many online companies have gone from ideas to multi-billion-dollar enterprises in just a few years, and the entrepreneurs who launched these companies didn't need to ask anyone's permission. They just had to prove their ability to meet customers' needs. Meanwhile, thanks to the ever-growing demand for access to innovative online content and services, home broadband adoption has risen from just 3% in 2000 to over 60% today. This growth has given broadband providers the opportunity to earn a fair return on the billions of dollars that they have invested every year in developing and deploying technologies to meet Internet users' escalating bandwidth needs. The rules that we propose today have been crafted to preserve this cycle of innovation and investment, even as the market for broadband is changing. Online services can present competitive threats to broadband providers' profits in adjacent businesses, such as voice and video. The possibility that providers could interfere with the flow of Internet traffic in ways that violate historical principles creates unnecessary uncertainty for online businesses and their investors. Tactics that are in the short-term interest of individual providers could have harmful effects on the sector as a whole, and once adopted, new network management or business practices could become difficult to reverse. By codifying the basic principles under which most broadband providers and online companies have long operated, the rules that we propose today will bring increased certainty to this vital sector of the U.S. economy while preserving the flexibility broadband providers need to keep improving their networks. Broadband providers, online businesses, and investors will all know what to expect under these rules because they largely reflect the way the Internet works now. Among the greatest beneficiaries of this increased certainty will be startups and small businesses. Some of them will become our country's next success stories, bringing new products to market, creating jobs, and fueling demand for new rounds of innovation and investment in broadband infrastructure.
The proposed order would establish 3 basic rules that are grounded in broadly accepted Internet principles, as well as the Commission's prior decisions. I will describe the proposed rules tailored to fixed technologies, and Ruth Milkman will discuss the proposed rules tailored to mobile broadband. The first rule is transparency. Broadband providers must disclose their network management practices and the performance characteristics and commercial terms of their broadband services. This rule will ensure that consumers and innovators have the information they need to understand the capabilities of broadband services while giving providers flexibility in how they deliver that information. The second rule prohibits blocking. Providers of fixed broadband Internet access service may not block lawful content, applications, services, or non-harmful devices. This rule is based on the first 3 Internet Policy Statement principles and consolidates 3 separate rules that were published in the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking in this proceeding. The no blocking rule bars a provider of fixed broadband from charging providers of content, applications, services, or devices simply for delivering traffic to or from the broadband provider's end user customers. The third rule prohibits unreasonable discrimination. Providers of fixed broadband Internet access services may not unreasonably discriminate in transmitting lawful network traffic. The record in this proceeding convinced us that there are some forms of differential treatment of traffic that are beneficial and some that are harmful, so an unreasonable discrimination standard is preferable to the bright-line non-discrimination rule the Commission proposed in the notice. The rules are subject to reasonable network management. A network management practice is reasonable if it is appropriate and tailored to achieving a legitimate network management purpose, taking into account the particular network architecture and technology of the broadband Internet access service. Finally, the order acknowledges the category of specialized services, which share capacity with broadband Internet access service over providers' last-mile facilities. There may be benefits for consumers from these services, but they also present an opportunity for broadband providers to exert greater control over consumers' Internet experience. The proposed order provides that rather than taking action at this time, the Commission would observe market developments to verify that specialized services promote investment, innovation, competition, and consumer benefits without undermining or threatening the open Internet.
Openness is as important for mobile broadband networks as for other broadband platforms. Consumers are using mobile broadband at an accelerating pace, and access to mobile broadband is becoming increasingly essential to innovation, investment, and freedom of expression. As a result of moves toward openness by wireless providers, users are gaining greater access to diverse applications, content, and services, and have more opportunities to use compatible third-party devices. At the same time, there have been instances of mobile providers blocking third-party applications, and concerns have been raised about inadequate transparency. There are, however, important differences between mobile and fixed broadband. Mobile broadband is an earlier stage platform and is quickly evolving. The significant and fast-moving change in mobile broadband counsels for a measured approach, an approach that fosters openness without triggering unforeseen consequences in this highly dynamic area. We therefore tailor certain of the open Internet principles to mobile broadband, requiring compliance with the transparency rule and a basic no blocking rule. First, the transparency rule applicable to mobile is the same one applicable to fixed broadband providers and directs mobile broadband providers to disclose their third-party device and application certification procedures and clearly explain criteria for any restrictions on use of their networks. Second, the order establishes that mobile broadband providers may not block access to lawful websites. The rule enables consumers to access content of their choosing while allowing mobile providers to manage their networks. Third, the order prohibits mobile broadband providers from blocking apps that compete with their voice and video telephony services. This provision is intended to address situations in which mobile providers have the strongest incentives to limit Internet openness to advantage their core businesses. However, the order specifies that the no blocking rule does not generally apply to mobile broadband providers engaged in the operation of app stores. As with the rules that apply to fixed broadband, all of these rules allow mobile providers to engage in reasonable network management. And finally, the order expresses the Commission's commitment to continue to monitor and solicit input on further developments, including the effects of the Open Internet rules and the upper 700 megahertz C-block spectrum conditions.
The proposed order encourages private resolution of disputes about Internet openness, but it also establishes enforcement mechanisms to address situations in which a private resolution is not possible. Under the order, consumers can submit informal complaints to the Commission using the FCC.gov website without a filing fee. In addition, after giving 10 days notice to the broadband provider, any person may file a formal complaint alleging a violation of the Open Internet rules. Complaints may be expedited under the Enforcement Bureau's so-called rocket docket procedures. The Commission also has the option of itself initiating investigations and enforcement actions. I'll now turn to the Commission's legal authority to adopt these Open Internet rules. As the Supreme Court has said, Congress gave the Commission a mandate to conform its rules to the dynamic aspects of the communications industry. The Open Internet rules respond to that challenge, and the Office of General Counsel is satisfied that the Commission has statutory authority to adopt them. First, Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 directs the Commission to encourage the deployment on a reasonable and timely basis of advanced telecommunications capability to all Americans. The history of the 1996 Act, Commission precedent, and case law, including the D.C. Circuit's recent Comcast BitTorrent case, are all consistent with the view that Section 706 directs the Commission to take actions that, 1, involve interstate and foreign communication by wire or radio, 2, encourage broadband deployment to all Americans, and 3, promote local telecommunications competition or remove barriers to infrastructure investment. The rules before you meet all 3 requirements. The Commission also is charged with protecting competition and consumers of telecommunications services. For instance, it has authority to ensure that over-the-top Internet voice services, VoIP, can develop as a rival to traditional phone services. The Commission likewise must safeguard interconnection between telephone customers and VoIP users. Open Internet rules help to do these things. The Commission's authority additionally flows from its responsibilities to oversee broadcasting and advanced video competition. Blocking or disadvantaging online offerings limits the ability of television radio broadcasters to offer their programming over the Internet. Direct broadcast satellite providers similarly depend on the Internet to supplement their video programming services. Interference with Internet delivery limits their ability to compete with cable and telephone companies in providing subscription video services. The Commission has statutory duties to prevent these harms. Finally, fixed and mobile wireless services use radio spectrum that the Commission licenses. The Commission can and must place conditions on licenses to serve the public interest, and Open Internet rules further this goal as well. In short, Open Internet rules promote efficient, nationwide communications, which, as Section 1 of the Communications Act says, is the core mission Congress gave this Commission.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, as you have heard, this order would ensure the continued openness of the Internet that we enjoy today, and would promote the interests of consumers, investors, broadband providers, and innovators with 3 basic rules that are grounded in the Commission's precedent and existing legal authority. For all the reasons that my colleagues and I have given, we recommend that you adopt this item, and we request editorial privileges. Thank you.
Well, thanks to each of you and all the others who worked on this for your incredibly hard and excellent work. Let's proceed to comments from the bench. Commissioner Copps?
Thank you. I hope in years to come, as we look back on this day, we do so with an ability to see it as an important turning point in the struggle to ensure the continued openness of the Internet against the potential of powerful gatekeeper control. On numerous fronts in the Open Internet order before us today, the Commission is taking strides forward. In others, I pray that our sometimes excessive caution will not undermine the spirit of the order that we are adopting. The Internet was born on openness, it thrived on openness, and it will achieve its full potential only through continued openness. It is my fervent desire that with this order we start to write the next chapter in the great Internet success story, one of continued openness, innovation without needing to seek permission from anyone, and expanded access for all Americans. We cannot afford allowing special interests to relegate the awesome opportunity-creating power of the open Internet into the sad history of what might have been. Permitting gigantic corporations, in many cases monopoly or duopoly broadband Internet access service providers, to exercise unfettered control over Americans' access to the Internet not only creates risks to technological innovation and to economic growth, but it poses a real threat to freedom of speech and to the future of our democracy. Increasingly, our national conversation, our source for news and information, our knowledge of one another will depend upon the Internet. Our future town square will be paved with broadband bricks. It must be accessible to all, not handed over to a handful of gatekeepers who can control our access. As I have long argued, and as many students of the medium have written, previous telecommunications and media technologies, also conceived in openness, eventually fell victim to consolidated control by a few powerful interests, fell victim to speculative mania by investors, and fell victim to mistaken government policies which assumed that wise public policy was no public policy. We are supposed to learn from history. Too often, we do not. Increasingly, the private interests who control our 21st century information infrastructure resemble those who seize the master switch, as Tim Wu's new book calls it, of the last century's communications networks. In 2003, I cautioned, somewhat dramatically perhaps, but not terribly inaccurately, that the, quote, Internet may be dying because entrenched interests were positioning themselves to control the Internet's choke points, end quote. I called then, as I have repeatedly since, for clear rules to maintain openness and freedom on the Internet and to fight discrimination over ideas and content and technologies. 2 years later, I was able to convince my colleagues to, at a minimum, adopt an Internet policy statement that contained the basic rights of Internet end users to access lawful content, run applications and services, connect devices to the Internet and the network, and to enjoy the benefits of competition. Now, at long last, we adopt at least some concrete rules to prevent gatekeepers from circumventing the openness that made the Internet, and from stifling innovation, investment, and job creation. All we need to do is look at our history at the FCC as a cautionary tale. It wasn't all that long ago, at least when you're at my age, I guess, that one network, AT&T, ran the whole show. AT&T had the power to decide how the network would be used. When innovators showed up at the door with ideas and new technologies, they were often greeted with a usually courteous but always quick, go away. For a long time, the FCC fully supported this type of network, and in fact served as its protector. It was thought that only through comprehensive control by a single company could the quality and the safety and scale economies of the network be guaranteed. Bigger was better, and uniformity and stability were thought to be worth the price of lost opportunities for innovation and consumer benefits. All of this began to change in the late 1960s when an innovator called Carter Electronics Corporation developed a device that connected mobile radio telephone systems to the wireline network. This device, called the Carter phone, had a cradle into which a regular handset was placed, and it converted voice signals to radio signals without the need for a direct electrical connection. But the entrenched incumbent claimed that allowing this innovative and foreign attachment would bring down the entire system. Why? Because the entrenched incumbent didn't build it, didn't sell it, and didn't control it. Sound familiar? Over the complaints of a powerful special interest, the Commission worked up enough courage to change tack, stand up to the network gatekeeper, and do the right thing, requiring the network operator to permit attachment of this new application to the existing network. In spite of all the monopolist alarm bells that this decision meant the end of network quality and the end of reliable service as we knew it, just the opposite came to pass. The idea of having a network that couldn't discriminate against innovators who wanted to improve it finally began to break the chokehold that the gatekeeper had on the system. Years after the Carter phone decision, as we entered the early days of the Internet age, the Commission reaffirmed its policy of openness and competition by protecting freedom on both the access layer and the architectural layer of the Internet. In the computer inquiries, earlier commissions mandated that common carriers that own transmission pipes used to access the Internet must offer those pipes on non-discriminatory terms to independent Internet service providers, among others. Through these decisions, the Commission fostered competition by ensuring that consumers could reach independent providers. Congress then moved in the Telecommunications Act of 1996 to protect the architectural layer. Congress said that local telephone companies with choke point control of physical infrastructures would have to unbundle their transmission networks. Sadly, these policies were, in fairly short order, decimated by the two commissions that served here between 2001 and 2009. Over my strenuous objections, and those of my colleague Jonathan Adelstein, the FCC took American consumers on a dangerous deregulatory ride, moving the transmission component of broadband outside of the statutory framework Congress had created to apply to telecommunications carriers. When those commissions stopped treating advanced telecommunications as telecommunications, they relegated American competitiveness to the sidelines. I don't like to see my country on the sidelines, and neither do most Americans. And remember, this was a major flip-flop from the historic and successful approach of requiring non-discrimination in our communications networks. Because of the errors of those previous commissions, the court told us earlier this year that the legal framework upon which the FCC built its action against Comcast for disrupting peer-to-peer traffic was inadequate. Since the decision in Comcast, the good ship FCC has found itself adrift without the tools needed to keep even the most basic consumer protections afloat in today's communications networks. Today, we finally try to patch the hole left by the Comcast decision by adopting certain rules to preserve the openness of the Internet. To be clear, we do not anchor ourselves on what I believe to be the best legal framework, nor have we crafted rules as strong as I would have liked. But with today's action, we do nonetheless appear to steer ourselves back toward a better course. I had hoped that we would move full throttle to restore the kind of policies that had worked in the past. I wanted to put those 8 years of public policy aberration, some, me included, dare call them years of abdication, totally behind us. So I pushed as hard as I could to get broadband telecommunications back where they belonged, under Title II of our enabling statute, where hard-won consumer-friendly protections that had been built up over many, many years would provide a framework under which business could do its job of building and managing this great communications enterprise, making handsome profits in the process, while operating within a public policy framework giving them certainty and giving consumers the protections they needed and deserved. I wanted to go back to that balancing act that had generally worked for so many years for the common good. So yes, I continue to believe that a reassertion of our Title II authority would have provided the surest foundation for future Commission action. And I note with interest that the Commission's reclassification docket will remain open. There is more that I would have liked in this order. I would have preferred a general ban to discourage broadband providers from engaging in pay for priority, prioritizing the traffic of those with deep pockets who would consign the rest of us to a slower second-class Internet. I also believe we should have done more to strip loopholes from the definition of broadband Internet access service to prevent companies falsely claiming they are not broadband companies from slipping through. We made some improvements on the definition, but I still have some worries. I also argued for real parity between fixed and mobile, read wireline and wireless, technologies. After all, the Internet is the Internet, no matter how you access it. And the millions of citizens going mobile nowadays for their Internet and the entrepreneurs creating innovative wireless content, applications, and services should have the same freedoms and protections as those in the wired context. I had other areas of concern about something less than a bright line non-discrimination rule, keeping reasonable network management within bounds, and the substitution of monitoring for the certainty of enforcement in too many areas. So in my book, today's action could and should have gone further. Going as far as I would have liked was not, however, in the cards. The simpler and easier course for me at that point would have been dissent, and I considered that very, very seriously. But it became ever more clear to me that without some action today, the wheels of network neutrality would grind to a screeching halt for at least the next 2 years. So, reserving the right to dissent throughout, I spent the past 3 weeks in intensive discussions with all interested parties about how we might be able to do something to ensure the continued openness of the Internet and to put consumers, not big phone or big cable, in control of our online experiences. In the end, I believe we made some progress. Not so much as I had hoped, but more, I think, than some people expected. The language in the order that we will hopefully approve today moves the item, in my mind, from unacceptable to something in which I can concur, and that is what I intend to do. Among the many improvements to the order we achieve, we now at least conclude that pay-for-priority arrangements would generally violate our no unreasonable discrimination rule. We have also explicitly changed the text of the definition of broadband internet access service to close a loophole that, while protecting residential customers, would have jeopardized the open internet rights of small businesses, educational institutions, and libraries. We insisted on providing greater context to the definition so that broadband companies cannot easily evade the open internet protections. We have expanded our transparency requirements to give consumers the information they need to make informed choice by requiring disclosure on the broadband provider's website and also at the point of sale. In discussing the no unreasonable discrimination standard, we put particular emphasis on keeping control in the hands of users and preserving an application-blind network, a key part of making the Internet the innovative platform that it is today. Given the importance of the open Internet, we have also provided for rocket docket, expedited treatment to address consumer complaints. Rules on the books are simply a tool waiting to be wielded unless the Commission makes a priority of enforcing them. While it is no secret that I would have liked to see more in the mobile section of today's order, I believe the improvements we have made can start us on a path toward full parity with fixed broadband. After all, we clearly recognize today in the item that there is one Internet which should remain open for consumers and innovators alike, although it may be accessed through different technologies and services, and that's a quote. More narrowly, we have managed to better refine the actions we do take today. For example, we clarify that a wireless broadband provider cannot block applications that compete with not only its own competitive voice and telephony applications, but also with those in which it has an attributable interest. Separate and apart from today's order, we as a Commission must recognize that we have much urgent business to address to ensure a truly competitive mobile broadband environment, including resolving the pending proceedings related to early termination fees, handset exclusivity arrangements, interoperability in the 700 megahertz band, and data roaming, to name some of the pending decisions this Commission needs to make. It is not the job of just the FCC or government writ large or just consumers and citizens or just innovators and entrepreneurs to keep our infrastructure open and dynamic. It is the job of all of us. Why is this so important? Because we have in our grasp now the most powerful and promising communications technology in all of history. If we allow this opportunity-creating technology the freedom and the openness that it needs to reach its full potential, we can prepare our kids for a future that our country is finding more and more challenging. We will give our schools powerful new tools to educate us, young and old alike. We will be able to deploy these tools to improve our health, decrease our energy dependence, and create opportunities for whole communities that are being left behind in this new century. Rural communities, the inner cities, minorities, Indian country, and those with disabilities. The internet has to be accessible to all, responsive to all, and affordable to all. That's what this country worked for and largely achieved in building out electricity and plain old telephone service to all our citizens. It is what we need to work for with our 21st century broadband infrastructure. If vigilantly and vigorously implemented by this Commission, and if upheld by the courts, today's order could represent an important milestone in the ongoing struggle to safeguard what I refer to as the awesome power of the Internet. While I cannot wholeheartedly vote to approve the order, I will not block it by voting against it. It is a first step in the right direction. Not that first sturdy step I hope my newest grandchild will soon take, but at least forward, if somewhat hesitant, movement. Today's majority was crafted by discussion, respectful consideration of one another's thoughts, and give and take. I would have welcomed a little more give, but I suppose the chairman might see it a little bit differently. In any event, I thank him for his engagement and for his commitment. I want to pay special tribute to my colleague, Commissioner Mignon Clyburn. We shared many of the same concerns, I think it's fair to say, and her thoughtful and creative work, along with her heartfelt commitment to make this item work for consumers, by which she means all consumers, had a lot to do with making this a better order. Finally, I want to express a deep sense of gratitude to staff who worked to make this item better. Mine was great in every aspect of this endeavor. John Giusti and Margaret McCarthy worked creatively and tirelessly into the wee hours of many nights and through some awfully long weekends. So too Commissioner Clyburn's excellent team, Dave Grimaldi and Angie Cronenberg. I know many folks in the chairman's office sacrificed similarly, especially Rick Kaplan, Zach Katz, and Eddie Lazarus. Literally dozens of people in the bureaus worked mightily here too, and I thank them all. Thanks apart, though, our job does not end today. We haven't finished any race here. We haven't guaranteed an open internet going forward. We will have, I suspect, a lot of new roads to build, and some other roads, even ones that we lay out in today's order, that may require some repaving and repair before long. If that happens, I hope we will be fast off the mark to do whatever needs to be done. So, better than lapsing into a year of post-game armchair analysis or impugning motivations and all the rest, let's instead go to work on the job at hand, because our challenge really is nothing short of historic. It is to ensure that the liberating potential of our 21st century communications tools are used to provide the opportunities our citizens, all of our citizens, require to be fully productive citizens of a fully productive country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Copps. Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your solicitousness regarding throughout this whole proceeding. In the spirit of the holidays and with goodwill towards all, I will present a condensed version of a more in-depth statement, the entirety of which I respectfully request be included in this report in order. At the outset, I would like to thank the selfless and tireless work of all of the career public servants here at the Commission who have worked long hours on this project. And Sharon, thank you very much for putting up those names. It looked like the credits for a Cecil B. DeMille movie there with a cast of thousands. Although I strongly disagree with this order, all of us should recognize and appreciate that you have spent time away from your families as you've worked through weekends, the holidays of Thanksgiving and Hanukkah, as well as deep into the Christmas season. Such hours take their toll on family life, and I thank you for the sacrifices made by you and your loved ones throughout. For those who might be tuning into the FCC for the first time, Please know that over 90% of our actions are not only bipartisan, but unanimous. I challenge anyone to find another policymaking body in Washington with a more consistent record of consensus. We agree today that the Internet is and should remain open and freedom-enhancing. It is and always has been so under existing law. Beyond that, we disagree. The contrast between our perspectives could not be sharper. My colleagues and I will deliver our statements and cast our votes. Then I am confident that we will move on to other issues where we can find common ground once again. I look forward to working on public policy that is more positive and constructive for American economic growth and consumer choice. William Shakespeare taught us in The Tempest, what's past is prologue. That time-tested axiom applies to today's Commission action. In 2008, the FCC tried to reach beyond its legal authority to regulate the Internet, and it was slapped back by an appellate court only 8 short months ago. Today, the Commission is choosing to ignore the recent past as it attempts the same act. In so doing, the FCC is not only defying a court, but it is circumventing the will of a large bipartisan majority of Congress as well. More than 300 members have warned the agency against exceeding its legal authority. The FCC is not Congress. We cannot make laws. Legislating is the sole domain of the directly elected representatives of the American people. If the majority is determined to ignore the growing chorus of voices emanating from Capitol Hill in what appears to some as an obsessive quest to regulate at all costs. Some are saying that instead of acting as a cop on the beat, the FCC looks more like a regulatory vigilante. Moreover, the agency is further angering Congress by ignoring increasing calls for a cessation of its actions and choosing instead to move ahead just as members leave town. As a result, the FCC has provocatively charted a collision course with the legislative branch. Furthermore, on the night of Friday, December 10th, just 2 business days before the public would be prohibited by law from communicating further with us about this proceeding, the Commission dumped nearly 2,000 pages of documents into the record. As if that weren't enough, the FCC unloaded an additional 1,000 pages into the record less than 24 hours before the end of the public comment period. All of these extreme measures, defying the D.C. Circuit, Congress, and undermining the public comment process, have been deployed to deliver on a misguided campaign promise. Not only is today the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year, but it marks one of the darkest days in recent FCC history. I am disappointed in these ends justify the means tactics and the doubts they have created about this agency. The FCC is capable of better. Today is not its finest hour. Using these new rules as a weapon, politically favored companies will be able to pressure 3 political appointees to regulate their rivals to gain competitive advantages. Litigation will supplant innovation. Instead of investing in tomorrow's technologies, precious capital will be diverted to pay lawyers' fees. The era of Internet regulatory arbitrage has dawned. And to say that today's rules don't regulate the Internet is like saying that regulating highway on-ramps, off-ramps, and its pavement doesn't equate to regulating the highways themselves. What had been bottom-up, non-governmental, and grassroots-based Internet governance will become politicized. Today, the United States is abandoning the long-standing bipartisan and international consensus to insulate the Internet from state meddling in favor of a preference for top-down control by unelected political appointees, 3 of whom will decide what constitutes reasonable behavior. Through its actions, the majority is inviting countries around the globe to do the same thing. Reasonable is a subjective term. Not only is it perhaps the most litigated word in American history, its definition varies radically from country to country. The precedent has now been set for the Internet to be subjected to state interpretations of reasonable by governments of all stripes. In fact, at the United Nations just last Wednesday, a renewed effort by representatives from countries such as China and Saudi Arabia is calling for what one press account says is, quote, an international body made up of government representatives that would attempt to create global standards for policing the Internet, end quote. By not just sanctioning, but encouraging more state intrusion into the Internet's affairs, the majority is fueling a global Internet regulatory pandemic. Internet freedom will not be enhanced, it will suffer. My dissent this morning is based on 4 primary concerns. First, nothing is broken in the Internet access market that needs fixing. Second, the FCC does not have the legal authority to issue these rules. Third, the proposed rules are likely to cause irreparable harm. And fourth, existing law and Internet governance structures provide ample consumer protection in the event of a systemic market failure. Before I go further, however, I apologize if my statement does not address some important issues raised by the order, but we received the current draft at 11:42 p.m. last night, and my team is still combing through it. First, nothing is broken in the Internet access market that needs fixing. All levels of the Internet supply chain are thriving due to robust competition and low market entry barriers. The Internet has flourished because it was privatized in 1994. And at this point, I need to dispel a pervasive myth that broadband was once regulated like a phone company. Not only was the FCC's 2002 cable modem order unanimous, it did not move broadband from Title II. It formalized an effort started under Bill Kennard's FCC. But I will include a more thorough history as part of my statement. Since its privatization, the Internet has migrated further away from government control until today. Its success was the result of bottom-up collaboration and not top-down regulation. No one needs permission to start a website or navigate the web freely. To suggest otherwise is nothing short of fear-mongering. Myriad suppliers of Internet-related devices, applications, online services, and connectivity are driving productivity and job growth in our country. About 80% of Americans own a personal computer. Most are connected to the Internet. In the meantime, the Internet is going mobile. By this time next year, consumers will see more smartphones in the U.S. market than feature phones. In addition to countless applications used on PCs, growth in the number of mobile applications available to consumers has gone from nearly 0 in 2007 to 500,000 just 3 years later. Mobile app downloads are growing at an annual rate of 92%, with an estimated 50 billion applications expected to be downloaded in 2012, probably most of which will be downloaded by my children onto my iPhone. Fixed and mobile broadband Internet access is the fastest penetrating disruptive technology in history. In 2003, only 15% of Americans had access to broadband. Just 7 years later, 95% do. 8 announced national broadband providers are building out facilities in addition to the construction work of scores more local and regional providers. More competition is on the way as providers light up recently auctioned spectrum. Furthermore, the Commission's work to make unlicensed use of the television white spaces available to consumers will create even more competition and choice. In short, competition, investment, innovation, productivity, and job growth are healthy and dynamic in the Internet sector thanks to bipartisan, deregulatory policies that have spanned 4 decades. The Internet has blossomed under current law. policies that promote abundance and competition rather than the rationing and unintended consequences that come with regulation are the best antidotes to the potential anti-competitive behavior feared by the rule's proponents. But don't take my word for it. Every time the government has examined the broadband market, its experts have concluded that no evidence of concentrations or abuses of market power exists. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, one of the premier antitrust authorities in government, not only concluded that the broadband market was competitive, but it also warned that regulators should be wary of network management rules because of the unknown, quote, net effects on consumers, end quote. The FTC rendered that unanimous and bipartisan conclusion in 2007. As I discussed earlier, the broadband market has become only more competitive since then. More recently, the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division reached a similar conclusion when it filed comments with us earlier this year. While it sounded optimistic regarding the prospects for broadband competition, it also warned against the temptation to regulate, quote, to avoid stifling the infrastructure investments needed to expand broadband access, end quote. Disturbingly, the Commission is taking its radical step today without conducting even a rudimentary market analysis. Perhaps that is because a market study would not support the order's predetermined conclusion. My second point is the FCC does not have the legal authority to issue these rules. Time does not allow for me to refute all of the legal arguments raised in the order, the newest version of which we are still reviewing, but I will do my best. I have included a more thorough analysis in the supplemental section of this statement. Nonetheless, I'll touch on a few of the legal arguments endorsed by the majority. Overall, the order is designed to circumvent the D.C. Circuit's Comcast decision, but this new effort will fail in court as well. The order makes a first-time claim that somehow, through the deregulatory bent of Section 706, way back in 1996, Congress gave the Commission direct authority to regulate the Internet. The order admits that its rationale requires the Commission to reverse its long-standing interpretation that this section conveys no additional authority beyond what is already provided elsewhere in the Act. This new conclusion, however, is suddenly convenient for the majority while it grasps for a foundation for its predetermined outcome. Instead of, quote, removing barriers to infrastructure investment, end quote, as Section 706 encourages, the order fashions a legal fiction to construct additional barriers. This move is arbitrary and capricious and is not supported by the evidence in the record or a change of law. The Commission's gamesmanship with Section 706 throughout this year is reminiscent of what was attempted with the contortions of the so-called 70/70 rule 3 years ago. I objected to such factual and legal manipulations then, and I object to them now. Furthermore, the order desperately scours the Act to find a tether to moor its alleged Title I ancillary authority. As expected, the order's legal analysis ignores the fundamental teachings of the Comcast case. The Titles 2, 3, and 6 of the Communications Act give the FCC the power to regulate specific, recognized classes of electronic communication services, which consist of common carriage telephony, broadcasting, and other licensed wireless services, and multi-channel video programming services. Despite the desires of some, Congress has not established a new title of the Act to police Internet network management, not even implicitly. The absence of statutory authority is perhaps why members of Congress introduced legislation to give the FCC such powers. In other words, if the Act already gave the Commission the legal tether it seeks, why was legislation needed in the first place? I'm afraid that this leaky ship of an order is attempting to sail through a regulatory fog without the necessary ballast of factual or legal substance. The courts will easily sink it. In another act of legal sleight of hand, the order claims that it does not attempt to classify broadband services as Title II common carrier services. Yet functionally, that is precisely what the majority is attempting to do to Title I information services, Title III licensed wireless services, and Title VI video services by subjecting them to non-discrimination obligations in the absence of a congressional mandate. What we have before us today is a Title II order dressed in a threadbare Title I disguise. Thankfully, the courts have seen this bait-and-switch maneuver by the FCC before, and they have struck it down each time. The order's expansive grasp for jurisdictional power here is likely to alarm any reviewing court because the effort appears to have no limiting principle. If we were to accept the order's argument, it would virtually free the Commission from its congressional tether, to quote many past courts. As the Supreme Court explained in Midwest Video 2, quote, without reference to the provisions of the Act expressly granting regulatory authority, the Commission's ancillary jurisdiction would be unbounded, end quote. I am relieved, however, that in the order, the Commission is explicitly refraining from regulating coffee shops. In short, if this order stands, there is no end in sight to the Commission's powers. I also have concerns regarding the constitutional implications of the order, especially its trampling on the First and Fifth Amendments. But again, in the observance of time, those thoughts are contained in my extended written remarks. My third concern is that the Commission's rules will cause irreparable harm to broadband investment and consumers. DOJ's cogent observation from last January regarding the competitive nature of the broadband market raises the important issue of the likely irreparable harm to be brought about by these new rules. In addition to government agencies, investors, investment analysts, and broadband companies themselves have told us that network management rules would create uncertainty to the point where crucial investment capital will become harder to find. This point was made over and over again at the FCC's Capital Formation Workshop on October 1st, 2009. A diverse gathering of investors and analysts told us that even rules emanating from Title I would create uncertainty. Other evidence suggests that internet management rules could not only make it difficult for companies to, quote, predict their revenues and cash flow, end quote, but a new regime could, quote, have the perverse effect of raising prices to all users, end quote. Additionally, today's order implies that the FCC has price regulation authority over broadband. In fact, the D.C. Circuit noted in its Comcast decision last spring that the Commission's attorneys openly asserted at January's oral argument that, quote, the Commission could someday subject broadband service to pervasive rate regulation to ensure that a broadband company provides the service at reasonable charges, end quote. Nothing indicates that the Commission has changed its mind since then. In fact, the order appears to support both direct and indirect price regulation of broadband services. Moreover, as lobbying groups accept this order's invitation to file complaints asking the government to distort the market further, the Commission will be under increasing pressure from political interest groups to expand its power and influence over the broadband market. In fact, some of my colleagues today are complaining that the order doesn't go far enough. Each complaint filed will create more uncertainty as the enforcement process becomes a de facto rulemaking circus, just as the Commission attempted in the ill-fated Comcast BitTorrent case. How does this framework create regulatory certainty? Even the European Commission recognized the harm such rules would cause to the capital markets when it decided last month not to impose measures similar to these. Part of the argument in favor of new rules alleges that giant corporations will serve as hostile gatekeepers to the internet. First, in the almost 9 years since those fears were first sown, net regulation lobbyists can point to fewer than a handful of cases of alleged misconduct out of an infinite number of internet communications. all of those cases were resolved in favor of consumers under current law. More importantly, however, many broadband providers are not large companies. Many are small businesses. Take, for example, Lariat, a fixed wireless internet service provider serving rural communities in Wyoming. Lariat has told the Commission that the imposition of network management rules will impede its ability to obtain investment capital and will limit the company's, quote, ability to deploy new service to currently unserved and underserved areas, end quote. Furthermore, Lariat echoes the views of many others by asserting that, quote, the imposition of regulations that would drive up costs or hamper innovation would further deter future outside investment in our company and others like it, end quote. Additionally, quote, to mandate overly burdensome network management policies would foster lower quality of service, raise operating costs, which in turn would raise prices for all subscribers, and or create a large backlog of adjudicative proceedings at the FCC in which it would be prohibitively expensive for small and competitive ISPs to participate, end quote. Lariat also notes that the imposition of net neutrality rules would cause immediate harm such that, quote, due to the immediate deleterious impacts upon investment, these damaging effects would be likely to occur even if the Commission's order was later invalidated, nullified, or effectively modified by a court challenge or congressional action, end quote. And many other small businesses have echoed these concerns, and all of this is in the record. Less investment, less innovation, increased business costs, increased prices for consumers, disadvantages to smaller ISPs, jobs lost, and all of this in the name of promoting the exact opposite. The evidence in the record simply does not support the majority's outcome-driven conclusions. In short, the Commission's action today runs directly counter to the laudable broadband deployment and adoption goals of the National Broadband Plan. No government has ever succeeded in mandating investment and innovation, and nothing has been holding back internet investment and innovation until now. The fourth point of my dissent is existing law provides ample consumer protection. To reiterate, the order fails to put forth either a factual or legal basis for regulatory intervention. Repeated government economic analyses have reached the same conclusion. No concentrations or abuses of market power exist in the broadband space. If market failure were to occur, however, America's antitrust and consumer protection laws stand at the ready. Both the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission are well equipped to cure any market ills. In fact, the antitrust law section of the American Bar Association agrees. Nowhere does the order attempt to explain why these laws are insufficient in its quest for more regulation. Moreover, for several years now, I've been advocating a potentially effective approach that won't get overturned on appeal. In lieu of new rules, which will be tied up in court for years now, the FCC could create a new role for itself by partnering with already established non-governmental internet governance groups, engineers, consumer groups, academics, economists, antitrust experts, consumer protection agencies, industry associations, and many others, to spotlight allegations of anti-competitive conduct in the broadband market and work together to resolve them. Since it was privatized, internet governance has always been based on a foundation of bottom-up collaboration and cooperation, rather than top-down regulation. This truly light-touch approach has created a near-perfect track record of resolving internet management conflicts without government intervention. Unfortunately, the majority has not even considered this idea for a moment. But once today's order is overturned on appeal, it is still my hope that the FCC will consider and adopt this constructive proposal. In sum, what's past is indeed prologue. Where we left the saga of the FCC's last net neutrality order before, was with a spectacular failure in the appellate courts. Today, the FCC seems determined to make the same mistake instead of learning from it. The only illness apparent from this order is regulatory hubris. Fortunately, cures for this malady are obtainable in court. For all the foregoing reasons, I respectfully, just in case you were guessing, dissent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Clyburn, please.
Thank you. A few weeks ago, I discussed the importance of collaboration in tackling the important yet difficult policy issues before us today. I want to pause for a moment and thank my very overworked but dedicated staff, Angela Cronenberg, Louis Perez, and Dave Grimaldi, and their families, Commissioner Copps and his staff, thank you so very much, the Office of the Chairman, the Commission staff, and the thousands of stakeholders who engaged with us over the past 16 months in crafting a framework that gives both broadband providers and consumers clear guidance about what provider behavior is acceptable and what is not. It was a result of all of your engagement, from the filings you made to the many meetings we had, that we have been able to get to this point today. Your dedication to the process and that of those whom you represent should be commended. Of course, as we all know, compromises typically must be made as many different interests collaborate on critical and significant issues. As a result, it is often the case that one cannot be completely satisfied with the outcome. Nonetheless, it is my belief that we have made great progress in this proceeding, and through this order, we are ensuring that the Internet will remain open for the benefit of many consumers. After all, they are the ultimate beneficiaries of an open Internet. Left to my own devices, there are several issues I would have tackled differently. As such, I am approving in part and concurring in part to today's order. While I appreciate the Chairman's recognition of some of my concerns and the adjustments made in the order to allay those concerns, there are several areas I would have strengthened so that more consumers would benefit from the protections we are adopting. First, I would have extended all of the fixed rules to mobile, so that those consumers who heavily or exclusively rely upon mobile broadband would be fully protected. There is evidence in our record that some communities, namely African American and Hispanic, use and rely upon mobile Internet access much more than other socioeconomic groups. So while this order does not go as far as I would like in protecting mobile consumers, I am pleased that it is quite clear that we are not pre-approving any action by mobile providers that would violate the fixed rules and the general principles of Internet openness. Moreover, the order provides for the ongoing monitoring of the mobile broadband marketplace, including the Commission's intention to create an open Internet advisory committee. That body's specific mission will be to assess and report to the Commission new developments and concern in the mobile broadband industry. I expect that the committee will closely observe the effects of that disparate rules for fixed and mobile providers will have on consumers who have chosen to cut the broadband cord, as well as the effects on intermodal competition. To that end, the Commission will stand ready to protect mobile consumers from any actions by providers that are inconsistent with an open Internet. Second, I would have prohibited pay for priority arrangements altogether. The order stresses the various harmful effects of these arrangements, including the serious threat to innovation on the Internet. I believe that prohibiting such arrangements would be more appropriate based on the evidence before us. Nonetheless, should providers enter into such arrangements and they are subsequently challenged at the Commission, providers will have to demonstrate that the arrangement is not harmful and is consistent with the public interest. Third, an open Internet should be available to all end users, residential, enterprise, for-profit, or not. This order goes a long way toward protecting an open internet for residents, small businesses, schools, libraries, patrons of coffee shops, bookstores, and the like. But I worry that those who may not fit into these categories will have to negotiate for access to the open internet and that they may be denied such access. We should carefully monitor whether an open internet is truly available to all end users and correct course if needed. I hope that the aforementioned Open Internet Advisory Committee can track any harmful effects on those end users who do not currently qualify for protections adopted today, and the committee recommend Commission action as necessary. Finally, earlier this year, I stated my preference for the Commission's legal authority over broadband internet access service. While the route taken here is not the one I originally preferred, I believe that it is appropriate for the Commission to act to protect an open internet. I know there will be many lawyers studying the legal authority cited in this order in the weeks, months, and perhaps years ahead, and judicial review ultimately will determine the fate of this order. I sincerely hope that the Commission's authority to protect consumers' access to an open internet is upheld. Today, the internet is as critical to the nation for communicating as our legacy telephone, broadcast, and mobile phone networks. As described more fully in the order, without an open internet, consumers will have fewer choices and opportunities, which has the potential to impact many aspects of their lives. Their ability to obtain an education, telecommute, look for a job, search for information online, shop, make investment decisions, communicate with friends, family, and colleagues, obtain news, and I can go on, but I won't, given the length of the meeting today. Accordingly, I believe that it is necessary and appropriate that broadband providers operate pursuant to a legal policy and framework that ensures that the internet remains open under the Commission's watchful eye. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner Baker.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Respectfully, I really dissent. I disagree with the policy, I disagree with the politics, and I disagree with the procedure of this item. Like my colleague, Commissioner McDowell, I also have a longer written statement that I'll ask to be put into the record and try and shorten my remarks here. Preserving the open internet is non-negotiable. It is a bedrock principle shared by all in the internet economy, a building block on which we can all agree. And the internet is open today. The evidentiary record in our proceeding has reaffirmed that government action is not necessary to preserve it. Yet the majority acts decisively to adopt net neutrality rules, imposing the heavy hand of government into how broadband networks will be managed and operated. The data most certainly does not drive us to this result. In the final analysis, the Commission intervenes to regulate the internet because it wants to, not because it needs to. I cannot support this decision. It is not a consumer-driven or engineering-focused decision. It is not motivated by a tangible competitive harm or market failure. The majority bypasses the market power analysis altogether and acts on speculative harms alone. They are unable to identify a single ongoing practice that they find problematic. In the end, the internet will be no more open tomorrow than it is today. The majority does all of this without any apparent appreciation of the regulatory costs and distortive effect of government micromanagement of broadband networks. Did the Commission kill the future of the internet today? Of course not. But in this dynamic industry, they have no rational means to estimate the real damage they did to the future development of business models, network management techniques, and core networks. The Commission put its thumb on the scale as to where innovation in the internet economy will be focused and how future networks will be financed. The order repeatedly expresses concerns about the significant consequences to internet edge companies if their incentive to innovate and investment is chilled. The majority ignores the same grave consequences of government action chilling the network's analogous incentives to innovate and invest. It is regrettable that the majority did not take a more holistic view of the internet economy. I keep returning to what should be a threshold question. Why do we intervene in the one sector of the economy that is working so well to create high-paying jobs, untold consumer choice, and entrepreneurial opportunity? The only reason left is to deliver on one of the president's campaign promises. I must respectfully dissent. I have 7 principal objections to this order. I actually have way more than that, but I have a plane to catch, so you're lucky. Before I start, I want to touch on the question of regulatory certainty. The net neutrality and Title II proceedings have been an economic drag on operators for over a year. I empathize with businesses that desperately need certainty to help jumpstart efforts to invest and recover economically. It was our stable regulatory foundation that gave investors the confidence to pump billions into the internet economy, and I share the desire to find a new stable footing. I object, however, to the majority suggesting that its action is premised on providing regulatory certainty. At best, the majority solves a problem of its own making. I also have some apprehension whether our legally precarious action today can provide the certainty promised, and whether our decision will, unfortunately, add to that uncertainty. Concern number 1. The majority's decision lacks an analytical framework to justify government intervention. Competition and consumer demand have ensured that the internet remains open, and the majority offers no record evidence to suggest otherwise. The majority resorts to metaphor. There are cracks in the infrastructure. But our record does not support a conclusion of any real structural failing. At best, there's a burned out bulb in the Christmas lights, and we endeavor to replace the entire electrical system to fix it. There is no global problem, no crisis of magnitude to justify the majority's overreach. The majority's repeated fallback is that network operators have incentives to act badly. The language is consistently conditional. The word could alone appears 61 times. Throughout the decision, the majority presumes a malign intent on the part of broadband providers for which there's no factual foundation. This line of reasoning is flatly inconsistent with a decade of actual industry practice. If the incentives for misconduct are so strong, one would assume the evidentiary record would include widespread examples of anti-competitive conduct. There is no such evidence. Given the non-existent factual record to support its action, the majority is left to grand declarations about the internet as an indispensable platform supporting our nation's economic and civic life, to mask the clear deficiencies of its analysis. In doing so, they ignore the FTC's warning that regulators should be wary of enacting net neutrality regulation solely to prevent prospective harm. I share the FTC's concerns. Concern number 2. The majority's claim that consumers will benefit from this government overreach is unsupported and deeply flawed. The majority repeatedly couches this as a pro-consumer or a consumer-driven approach. They try to frame this as big business gatekeeper versus the consumer. But upon closer inspection, the order is focused on promoting the edge, internet applications and services, over networks and consumers. I strongly disagree that promoting the edge over the networks because there was no choice necessary. In this instance, having your cupcake and eating it too was an actual option. In the majority's quest to address allegations that broadband providers may try to pick winners and losers, the government has picked its own winners. In the long term, I'm worried that the government's micromanagement of tomorrow's internet will leave consumers worse off. Efforts to ensure that all Americans have access to broadband will be put at risk. Adoption efforts to get the third of American households that are not broadband subscribers online will be challenged. And if network upgrades and improvements are delayed or foregone, entrepreneurs won't be able to create and consumers won't be able to use the next great application. Forgive me if I do not view these potential developments as pro-consumer. The order's analysis of the new rules also contradicts any claimed consumer focus. With respect to paid prioritization, the majority concludes that prioritization arrangements with consumers would be unlikely to violate our rules. In contrast, deals with third-party internet companies would raise significant cause for concern. In other words, charging end-user consumers is fine, but charging internet companies is not. By seeking to carve out application providers from any future compensation models, the practical effect of this decision may be that the cost of building out tomorrow's networks will be borne by the consumers. The price tag is estimated to be $182 billion in the next 5 years alone. A similar preference for edge companies over consumers is reflected by the majority's approach to transparency. Transparency should be about giving consumers the basic tools to make an informed decision. We should be working across the internet economy towards standardized disclosures to inform consumer choice, to shed sunlight, good and bad, on practices of networks, applications, and devices. That is not the approach the majority takes. The language of the order is exceedingly prescriptive. The majority seeks to micromanage how information is conveyed to broadband consumers and edge companies. By doing so, the order sets up a transparency regime that may be so detailed and engineering focused that the average consumer will be no better off. Concern number 3. The majority's focus on preserving network operators' current conditions will distort tomorrow's internet. Given the dynamic nature of the internet, focusing on preserving today's networks and practices is the wrong objective. The internet is not a mature market, and networks cannot stand still. The capacity to meet the escalating demands of existing users, let alone new users, will strain the resources of all operators and test network management practices. There also continues to be a great amount of experimentation in business models and consumer expectations. The threat of government censure will unmistakably chill new developments and inhibit the ability of networks to evolve. Innovate at your own risk is the wrong message to send, but I'm afraid it's the message that will be received. I'm troubled by the negative treatment of so many vital components of our broadband networks, our modern broadband networks receive in this order. We have turned prioritization into a dirty word. To me, it is about quality of service and optimizing services for real-time applications. 4G won't even work properly without prioritization. Specialized services should be embraced. They have been primary drivers of voice and video competition and have been critical to justify the cost of today's and tomorrow's networks. Network management is similarly viewed as a potential loophole for misconduct, not an engineering marvel. I do not think the majority believes any of these functionalities are inherently problematic, but the overwhelming focus on the potential for wrongdoing is misplaced. It is fair to highlight potential areas of concern, but only in the context of a much more balanced and objective presentation. Concern number 4. The majority puts the Commission in the unworkable role of Internet referee. The genius of the Internet to date is that there is no central command, no unitary authority to dictate how innovation is to occur. No one must ask for permission. The majority has altered fundamentally that winning formula, forcing the Commission into the role of judging how broadband networks will evolve. By adopting rules that will require significant interpretation, by creating new undefined terms, and by muddling its analysis with cautionary notes, the majority has ensured that the new innovation and new practices will be subject to its approval. This adds delay and uncertainty, and I fear the government will take too prominent a role in shaping tomorrow's internet. Concern number 5, and this one's big, the majority regulates an entire sector of the internet without any legitimate legal authority to do so. The D.C. Circuit only months ago rejected our attempt to enforce net neutrality principles. The Commission will return to court with the same basic infirmities. First, we have no explicit statutory authority to support this decision. And second, the majority's legal theory would give the Commission an unbounded right to adopt any policies it wants to promote its particular vision of the internet. The FCC literally has no power to act until and unless Congress gives it power. Congress has never given the Commission authority to regulate Internet network management, a fact validated by the court in Comcast. The majority, however, tries the everything but the kitchen sink defense, 24 claimed statutory bases. The majority elects sheer quantity to make up for quality, and in doing so, contorts the letter and the spirit of the Act to try to justify rules adopted in a results-oriented process. The bulk of the legal support is based on ancillary authority grounds that are indistinguishable from the ones rejected by Comcast, the court in Comcast. So I will therefore just focus on Section 706A. I am not persuaded by the majority's attempt to twist a 14-year-old deregulatory policy statement into an affirmative grant of authority. Section 706A directs the Commission to encourage broadband deployment, relying on authority elsewhere in the Act. Our decisions are informed by Section 706. It is a guidepost as to how to use our statutory mandated responsibilities. The Commission held long ago that the most logical statutory interpretation is that Section 706 does not constitute an independent grant of authority. The majority attempts unsuccessfully to rewrite this straightforward provision and its clear-cut history. The core of the majority's analysis is its mischaracterization of the 1998 Advanced Services Order. Under the majority's view, the Commission has never interpreted Section 706 in its totality. The Commission raised this identical argument into the Comcast court, and it was appropriately rejected. Even if Section 706 were a grant of authority, that provision could not support today's prescriptive and investment-chilling action that raises barriers to broadband network investment. The text of Section 706A is clear. It is about encouraging broadband deployment with a clear deregulatory focus on removing barriers to infrastructure investment. The Commission has no authority to erect obstacles in the name of removing them. It strains all credibility to contend that imposing net neutrality obligations could promote broadband deployment. By reading out of the provision any deregulatory focus, the deployment purpose, and the removal of barrier limitation, the Commission has given itself plenary authority to regulate the Internet. Anything that promotes the virtuous cycle in the Internet ecosystem could be regulated. This is my biggest concern with the majority's Section 706A analysis. In essence, the majority has replaced an unbounded ancillary authority rejected by the Comcast court with an equally unbounded direct authority. Trading one unlimited power for another is far from comforting to me. When the Commission feels compelled to explicitly decline to apply our rules directly to coffee shops, bookstores, and airlines, it illustrates the lack of any ascertainable outer limits to our authority. I also have to believe a court will be skeptical of the timing and the manner in which the majority has discovered Section 706A to be a superpower, unlocked only after an adverse court opinion and political pressure to find some legal foundation to justify sweeping net neutrality rules. Concern number 6. The majority's decision to act as a legislator, not regulator, is a mistake that may undermine our agency's mission. The Commission adopts rules that are almost word for word a draft bill under consideration in Congress. We are a creature of Congress, not Congress itself. Using a legislative proposal to base our actions underscores that the majority acts beyond the appropriate role of an independent agency. When the Commission makes political decisions and takes actions best left to elected officials, our proceedings inevitably turn more partisan and more controversial. Issues of this magnitude, with such significant long-term consequences, are decisions best left to Congress. And concern number 7, opportunity cost. By that, I mean that we have squandered months on this effort, diverting resources and political capital away from real problems that lie within our core competencies. This spring, a unanimous commission called for action on broadband deployment and adoption, spectrum reform, universal service and intercarrier compensation reform, and a public safety network. Our focus belongs on that agenda, an actual pro-growth, pro-jobs game plan. Starting today, we should redouble our efforts to craft policies to create the regulatory environment necessary to attract the billions more in risk capital necessary to expand and improve our broadband infrastructure. I fear that today's action is not the end of this debate because of its significant consequences for the Internet, for the jurisdictional authority of this agency, and for the proper role of the FCC. This debate may well move to different fora, but I fear it will continue to take up too much oxygen in our community. That said, I remain always the optimist. Okay, I have to admit that this was actually a really good test of it, but still, I believe that when we work together, there's really much good that we can do. I hope that the new year brings a fresh perspective on our nation's communications challenges and a renewed focus on working collaboratively together. While I may disagree with our decision, I do want to thank all of you at the table and those that have worked on this issue through Thanksgiving, much of the holiday season, and a power outage. You guys sure earned a Christmas break this year. Importantly, I also want to thank my staff for their unbelievably hard work these past few weeks. In particular, I want to express my gratitude to Brad Gillen, who I just couldn't have done without your tireless, okay, now kind of tired, ability to get everything on the checklist done, your unflappable good nature, and your awesome, as in truly inspiring, work product. Thank you to all of you, and thank you also to your families. I'm particularly grateful to Hillary. I'm certain that she would have had you spend your holiday season a little bit differently. I feel compelled to make one last statement. We can disagree about policy decisions as we do here, but we should all agree that an open and sound process is critical to our decision making, particularly when the stakes are as high as this, the future shape of the Internet policy and the millions of jobs that depend upon it. And regrettably, I think this process failed at every step of this way. The most significant failure actually happened to be the last one. My office, as mentioned, did not receive a copy of today's order until 11:30 last night, and it had significant changes from the previous draft. So 12 hours before the meeting is not sufficient, given the magnitude of the issues that are at stake and the sheer number of changes, again, that had been made. It's inexcusable. And Mr. Chairman, you've set a higher bar for this agency to be data-driven and transparent, and you have lived up to that, but not here. So this is an inopportune time to do that. This proceeding did not need to be done in such a rushed and ill-considered manner this month. I think we can all do better, and let's do so in the new year.
Well, let me start with a quote. The web as we know it is being threatened. That's Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, in a recent article. He continued, and I quote, "A neutral communications medium is the basis of a fair, competitive market economy, of democracy, and of science. Although the Internet and web generally thrive on lack of regulation, some basic values have to be legally preserved." Today, for the first time, the FCC is adopting rules to preserve basic Internet values. While the Commission had in the past pursued bipartisan enforcement of open Internet principles, we have not had properly adopted rules. Now, for the first time, we'll have enforceable rules of the road to preserve Internet freedom and openness. To be clear, as we stand here now, the freedom and openness of the Internet are unprotected. No rules on the books to protect basic Internet values. No process for monitoring Internet openness as technology and business models evolve. No recourse for innovators, consumers, or speakers harmed by improper practices. And no predictability for Internet service providers so that they can effectively manage and invest in broadband networks. That will change once we vote to approve this strong and balanced order. The vote on the order comes after many months of debate, which has often produced more heat than light. Almost everyone says they agree that the openness of the internet is essential. That openness has unleashed an enormous wave of innovation, economic growth, job creation, small business generation, and vibrant free expression. And of course, that's right. But despite a shared allegiance to the internet as an open platform, there's been intense disagreement about the role of government in preserving internet freedom and openness. On one end of the spectrum, there are those who say government should do nothing at all on open internet. On the other end are those who would adopt extensive, overly detailed, and rigid regulations. A few on each side impose litmus tests. To some, unless their test is met, open internet rules are fake net neutrality. To others, unless their test is met, open internet rules are, quote, a government takeover of the internet. Now that's chutzpah, if I can borrow one of your phrases, Commissioner McDowell. For myself, I reject both extremes in favor of a strong and sensible, non-ideological framework, one that protects internet freedom and openness and promotes robust innovation and investment throughout the broadband ecosystem. Because none of these goals are abstractions. They live or die not in theory, but in practice, in the hard work of grappling with technology, business, and real-world consumer experiences. Now, in this issue, we do encounter familiar arguments. We heard some today, the kind trotted out to oppose almost any government action. Since we're dealing with nonfiction rather than fiction, there are many points that don't need response, but let me touch on a couple. We're told by some, for example, not to try to fix what isn't broken, and that rules of the road protecting internet freedom would discourage innovation and investment. But countless innovators, investors, and business executives say just the opposite, including many who generally oppose government regulation. Over the course of this proceeding, we've heard from so many entrepreneurs, engineers, venture capitalists, CEOs, and others working daily to invent and distribute new internet products and thereby maintain U.S. leadership in innovation. Their message has been clear. The next decade of innovation in this sector is at risk without sensible FCC rules of the road. As one leading early-stage investor put it in thoughts echoed in a letter we received from 30 prominent venture capitalists, quote, "The lack of basic rules of the road for what network providers and others can and can't do is starting to hamper innovation and growth." And as we heard in a letter from more than 24 leading technology CEOs, quote, "Common sense baseline rules are critical to ensuring that the internet remains a key engine of economic growth, innovation, and global competitiveness." The innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech leaders recognize, as I do, the vital need for massive investment in broadband infrastructure. Based on their in-market experience, they also tell us that broadband providers have natural business incentives to leverage their positions as gatekeepers in ways that would stifle innovation and limit the benefits of the internet. They point out that even after the Commission on a bipartisan basis announced open internet principles in 2005, we've seen clear and troubling deviations from open practices. Given the importance of an open internet to our economic future, given the potentially irreversible nature of some harmful practices, and given the competition issues among broadband providers, our record is filled with filings from businesses and consumer groups alike that it is essential that the FCC fulfill its historic role as cop on the beat to ensure the vitality of our communications networks and to empower and protect entrepreneurs and consumers of those networks. Now, at the same time, government must not overreach by imposing rules that are overly restrictive or that assume perfect knowledge about this dynamic and rapidly changing marketplace. We know that to meet our broadband speed and deployment goals for the country, broadband providers must have the business incentives to invest many billions of dollars to build out their networks. They must have the ability to run their networks effectively and the flexibility to experiment with new business models to further drive private investment. Today, we're adopting a set of high-level rules of the road that strikes the right balance between these imperatives. We're adopting a framework that will increase certainty for businesses, investors, and entrepreneurs. In key respects, the interests of edge innovators, the entrepreneurs creating internet content services and applications, their interests, the interests of broadband providers, and of American consumers are aligned. Innovation at the edge catalyzes consumer demand for broadband. Consumer demand spurs private investment and innovation in faster broadband networks, and faster networks sparks ever cooler innovation at the edge. I believe our action today will foster an ongoing cycle of massive investment, innovation, and consumer demand, both at the edge and in the core of broadband networks. Our action will strengthen the internet job creation engine. Our action will advance our goal of having America's broadband networks be the freest and the fastest in the world. Our action will ensure internet freedom at home, a foundation for fighting for internet freedom around the world. The crux of the order we're adopting, which is based on a strong and sound legal framework rooted in the Communications Act, is straightforward. Here are the key principles it enshrines and the key rules designed to preserve internet freedom and openness. First, consumers and innovators have a right to know the basic performance characteristics of their internet access and how their network is being managed. The transparency rule we adopt today will give consumers and innovators the clear and simple information they need to make informed choices in choosing networks or designing the next killer app. Shining a light on network management practices in a non-prescriptive way will also have an important deterrent effect on bad conduct. Second, consumers and innovators have a right to send and receive lawful traffic, to go where they want, say what they want, experiment with ideas on the internet, commercial and social, and use the devices of their choice. The rules thus prohibit the blocking of lawful content, apps, services, and the connection of devices to the network. Third, consumers and innovators have a right to a level playing field. No central authority, public or private, should have the power to pick winners or losers on the internet. That's the role of the commercial market and the marketplace of ideas. So we're adopting a ban on unreasonable discrimination, and we're making clear that we're not approving so-called pay-for-priority arrangements involving fast lanes for some companies, but not others. The order states that as a general rule, such arrangements won't satisfy the no unreasonable discrimination standard because it simply isn't consistent with an open internet for broadband providers to skew the marketplace by favoring one idea or application or service over another by selectively prioritizing internet traffic. Fourth, the rules recognize that broadband providers need meaningful flexibility to manage their networks to deal with congestion, security, and other issues. And we also recognize the importance and value of business model experimentation, such as tiered pricing. These are practical necessities and will help promote investment in and expansion of high-speed broadband networks. So for example, the order makes clear that broadband providers can engage in reasonable network management, providing certainty. Fifth, the principle of internet openness applies to mobile broadband. There's been some confusion on this, so let me be clear. There's one internet, and it must remain an open platform, however consumers and innovators access it. And so today we're adopting for the first time broadly applicable rules requiring transparency for mobile broadband providers and consumers, and prohibiting mobile broadband providers from blocking websites or blocking certain competitive applications. As I have said for many months, as many innovators and entrepreneurs have told us in the record, and as the facts and record bear out, there are differences between mobile and fixed broadband that are relevant in determining what action government should take for mobile at this time. Among the differences, unique technical issues involving spectrum and mobile networks, the stage and rate of innovation in mobile broadband, and market structure. Also, one of the largest mobile broadband providers has just begun providing 4G service using wireless spectrum subject to openness conditions adopted in connection with the auction of that spectrum. Importantly, our order makes clear that we are not endorsing or approving practices that the order doesn't prohibit, particularly conduct that is barred for fixed broadband. And we affirm our commitment to an ongoing process to ensure the continued evolution of mobile broadband in a way that's consistent with internet freedom and openness. Any reduction in mobile internet openness would be a cause for concern, as would any reduction in innovation and investment in mobile broadband applications, devices, or networks that depend on internet openness. Sixth, and finally, today's order recognizes the importance of vigilance in promptly enforcing the rules we're adopting, and vigilance in monitoring developments in areas such as mobile and the market for specialized services, which may affect internet openness. That's why I'm pleased that we've committed to create an Open Internet Advisory Committee that will assist the Commission in monitoring the state of openness and the effects of our rules. We're also launching an Open Internet Apps Challenge on challenge.gov that will foster private sector development of applications to empower consumers with information about their own broadband connections, which will also help protect internet openness. The rules of the road we adopt today are rooted in ideas first articulated by Republican Chairman Michael Powell and Kevin Martin and endorsed in a unanimous FCC policy statement in 2005. And they are grounded in the record we have developed over the past 14 months, including more than 100,000 public comments, numerous public workshops, and hundreds of meetings with stakeholders ranging across the spectrum. The list of participants also includes supportive input from the FTC and DOJ to the opposite effect of what we heard earlier. The chairman of the FTC participated in person in our proceedings. I am proud of the process that we and the staff have run at the Commission. It's been one of the most transparent in FCC history. And I'm proud of the result, which has already garnered broad support from the technology industry, including TechNet, the Information Technology Industry Council, the Internet Innovation Alliance, and the hundreds of technology companies those groups represent, as well as many other technology and internet companies. Support from investors of all sizes, including some of the nation's preeminent venture capitalists and angel investors. Our framework has also drawn support from key consumer, labor, and civil rights groups, a list that includes the Consumer Federation of America, Consumers Union, the Center for Democracy and Technology, and the Communication Workers of America. I thank them and the other groups that have worked so hard for many months on this issue. And our framework has been supported by a number of broadband providers as well, who recognize the sensible balance of our action and the value of bringing a level of certainty to this fraught issue. Our action today culminates recent efforts to find common ground on this challenging issue, here at the FCC, as well as by private parties and in Congress. I thank each of those who took their time over the last several months to take on these difficult issues, seeking to bridge gaps and find solutions, and who supported us in our efforts to do the same. I want to praise and thank my colleagues, Commissioner Copps and Clyburn, particularly for their vigor and constancy in pushing this commission to focus on the interests of consumers. Your work has certainly improved our rules and order. I'm glad, Commissioner Clyburn, that you mentioned the Open Internet Advisory Committee, because that idea came out of discussions that we had, and I think it'll be an important part of our ongoing processes. Commissioners McDowell and Baker, as you pointed out, this commission does tend to agree overwhelmingly on the issues before us, and I look forward to working together on a series of items to serve the public and grow our economy. I can't express enough appreciation to the remarkable staff of the FCC who have worked so hard and so well to wrestle with difficult issues and turn complex ideas into simple rules. Even as, at this commission, we have done more than one thing at once. It's been an extraordinary challenge for so many of the staff at the Commission, and we can't honor your service enough. That includes many offices and bureaus at the FCC, some represented by the leadership here on the panel today, many others working hard behind them, including our Office of General Counsel, our Office of Strategic Planning, our Office of Engineering and Technology, and the Wireline, Wireless, Media, Consumer, International bureaus. Broadband is horizontal. It stretches across the Commission. We find increasingly that almost everything that we work on requires coordination and collaboration among our staff, and we see that in a healthy, productive, interactive way from issues easy to hard, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me join my colleagues in thanking all the staff on the 8th floor, and in particular, the extraordinary team I'm lucky to have in the chairman's office. Eddie Lazarus, Rick Kaplan, Zach Katz, Josh Gottheimer, Jen Howard, Maria Gaglio, Daniel Ornstein. You've each gone well above and beyond the call of duty, keeping a wonderful sense of humor every day, a terrific spirit. You make each other smarter. You make me a lot smarter. I thank you for that. I apologize to your families, but I know they join me in honoring your service. Thanks to the work of these incredible public servants, thanks to our new media office, which has worked around the clock since the beginning of this proceeding to make sure that everything that we do is available online. We've set a new precedent, not just at the FCC, but around government, in the ways that we've opened up this proceeding, permitting people to file comments online, to participate interactively online. The new media team makes it look easy to the people who participate, but it's very, very hard to do, especially given the infrastructure challenges we have at the FCC. So I thank each of you for your work under the leadership of Steve Van Roekel. Thanks to the work of all of the incredible public servants I mentioned, today a strengthened FCC is adopting rules to ensure that the internet remains a powerful platform for innovation and job creation, to empower consumers and entrepreneurs, and protect free expression. These rules will increase certainty in the marketplace, spur investment both at the edge and in the core of our broadband networks, and contribute to a 21st century job creation engine in the United States. Finally, these rules fulfill many promises, including a promise to the future, a promise to the companies that don't yet exist, and the entrepreneurs who haven't yet started work in their dorm rooms or garage. For all that, I will be very proud to cast my vote. And with that, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye or concur.
Concur.
In part.
Oh. Trigger finger. All those opposed say nay.
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 The ayes have it. I apologize for that. So ordered. The request for editorial privileges is granted. And no, we haven't adjourned yet, and we will, Commissioner Baker, get you out of here for your plane. But let me first ask my colleagues if they have any announcements to make. None. Commissioner McDowell?
Very quickly. Well, everyone's thanked their staffs. My team doesn't like to be thanked publicly. I get yelled at when I do that. So for all the long hours that they've put in, for all the sick children that they've had to deal with while working on this, for all the spouses who've been left behind, they don't want me to thank them. So I'm going to honor that and not thank them. But we do have two law clerks who are leaving us. We have Brooke Erickson and Tom Curtin. They've also put in very long hours on this project, and we want to thank them. And this may be their last day, at least for now. So thank you all very much, Brooke and Tom.
Thank you. Let me just, in closing, as we bid farewell to 2010, on behalf of all the commissioners, say goodbye to many members of the FCC family. Keeping with tradition, many longtime employees will be retiring at the end of this month or just at the beginning of next year. Our employees are, of course, the FCC's greatest asset. Each of our retirees has made an enormous contribution to this agency. Together, these individuals who are retiring represent literally many centuries of service, advancing the agency's mission of promoting opportunity and prosperity through communications technology. I'm not going to acknowledge all of them individually. I do want to mention that thanks to Mary Beth Richards and Steve Van Rokel, we had a wonderful event a couple of weeks ago that honored all of the 30-plus year employees at the FCC. We had one 50-plus year employee who was honored, one 45-plus employee who was honored. One of the things that we really have to do is make sure that we get the oral histories of the incredible people here at the agencies who've seen technologies advance year after year, decade after decade, while the commissions, all of our predecessors and the predecessors before them, wrestled with issues a lot like those we're wrestling with today. So I thank all of the retirees. I'm glad that the commission room was packed on that day. As President Kennedy once said, the success of this government and thus the success of our nation depends upon the quality of our career public servants. It's often fashionable to say the opposite, but those of us who work here understand how hard and how well the staff of the FCC works. Please join me in thanking all of our staff, including especially our retirees, for their service and wishing them well. And on that note, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season. See you in the new year. Madam Secretary, please announce the date of the next FCC meeting.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Tuesday, January 25th, 2011.
And now we are adjourned.
Because there are so many reporters here today with questions, we're going to only take one per reporter, so no follow-ups. Apologies in advance for that. Lynn?
Are there aspects of the broadband plan that you've now planned into the head with now that you've got this neutrality thing out of the way?
Well, we've been moving forward with the National Broadband Plan from the day we adopted it. We've been doing it for the last several months. We'll continue to do it in the first, second, third, fourth quarters of 2011. It's very, very important that we move forward. But we've been, as you know, we've been doing it. We've been doing it, and we have a lot more work to do.
Steve?
I'll pass it.
Okay.
All four commissioners address legal authority for the FCC to actually execute these rules. And Commissioner Copps noted that the proceeding's still open on your third way reclassification. What is your opinion on what you should be doing going forward to make sure that you have the best legal authority on this?
We adopted, we have a legal basis for the rules we adopted today that's very strong, that gives us the authority we need, and that I'm confident will win in court.
I'd like to get some reaction, the congressional reaction to what you've done today. Senator Hutchison said she was going to try and overturn it in the Senate, and this is what Mitch McConnell said. Today, the Obama administration, which has already nationalized health care, the auto industry, insurance companies, banks, and student loans, will move forward with what would be the first step in controlling how Americans use the internet. Any reaction to either of those things?
You know, we adopted today a strong and balanced order that has widespread support and that focuses on the importance of internet freedom, the importance of private investment, the importance of business model experimentation. That's why we have so many different people from various parts of the ecosystem supporting it. It's a strong and balanced order, and I'm looking forward to speaking about it with anyone who is interested.
Are there one or more compelling cases under review that the FCC is now looking at that requires immediate action regarding this order?
I think there are some complaints that have been filed with us. Those are being looked at.
What can you say about the rules in wireless? A persistent criticism is they don't go far enough.
Well, like a lot of other parts of this, there are people who think it goes too far and people who think it doesn't go far enough. What we tried to do is focus on the real issues, the real technological issues, the real differences between mobile and broadband. We have adopted, for the first time, rules that protect consumers and entrepreneurs when it comes to wireless broadband. The transparency rule, no blocking of websites, no blocking of certain competitive applications. We also recognize that there are ways in which fixed and mobile are different and where more work needs to be done. And as I said in my statement, we'll be paying attention to the pace of innovation and investment in mobile broadband, and we'll be concerned if there's any diminution.
Joelle? Can you give us just some concrete examples of, not sort of in big lofty terms, but what does this mean for the average consumer going online, both through their wired connection in their home PC and then also through, an iPhone?
In many respects, this is about preserving the freedom and openness of the internet that has worked for many years. And so we don't expect to see significant changes. What we are trying to head off are changes that would close the internet, stifle the incredible innovation and investment that we've seen.
Mr. Chairman, do you think that the rules for wireless networks could be expanded or enhanced if at some point in the future the Commission determines that they need to be put on parity with wired connections?
Well, I think I wouldn't try to predict the future. I think one of the things that we've recognized over the course of this proceeding is that to do our job right, we really have to focus on facts and data. And there's a certain appropriate humility that we should have about technological and business changes. And so we've committed to monitoring all the various aspects of the broadband internet marketplaces, including mobile. We've set up some structures to make sure that we monitor it. Certainly our great hope is that there's the pace of innovation and openness grows, and that there won't be a need for government action.
Mr. Chairman, with the refinements to the order to secure the votes of Commissioners Copps and Clyburn, do you expect to lose any support from industry?
I don't. I think we have a strong and balanced order that serves the public interest, serves the economy. I'm very pleased with where it ended up. I think it's a very good day for innovators, for consumers, for the future of the internet, and for investment in our broadband infrastructure. Because I said in our statement, we need to have in the United States broadband networks that are both the freest and the fastest in the world. In order for that to happen, we need massive private investment, both at the edge of the network and in the networks themselves. And I believe that what we've done today will foster a reinforcing cycle of investment and consumer demand throughout the ecosystem. That's why I'm so pleased by this, and that's why I think it should have broad support.
Any other questions from members of Jim?
You heard some criticism about the rush to get this done by the end of the year. Why did you want to get this done by the end of the year? Is it because the Republicans are taking control in the House and you're concerned about the impact of that?
I heard more noise about moving too slowly on the proceeding. This has been open for 14 months. We had comment cycles that closed in October. If you go through the pace and schedule of this proceeding, it followed a very natural course.
What's your response to companies like Netflix and Apple who say this is going to hurt their ability to deliver movies online cheaper than a cable subscription?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I think the outcome of this should be to promote consumer choice, investment, innovation, and make sure that there are no unfair restrictions on particular content providers. So I think this will have a very positive effect on the entire internet ecosystem, including the provision of online video.
All right, thank you very much. David?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now proceed to phase 2 of our press conference, the staff briefing on the 2 items.
First, let me ask, does anybody have any questions on the 911 item? Yes. Oh, no. Anything on 911? Patrick, thank you very much. We'll now proceed to item number 2, the Internet item. Bureau Chiefs would please come forward. In your questions, if you want to direct it to any particular person, that might help us move forward, or we can caucus and decide who's best can answer. But ready? Lynn, go ahead with the first question.
I was a little confused about how this would apply in coffee shops. It seemed that Commissioner McDowell thought that it would not regulate coffee shops, but Commissioners Baker and someone else mentioned that it would apply to libraries, schools, coffee shops, bookshops.
The rules provide to apply to broadband providers, not to the places like coffee shops that have Wi-Fi connections where it's delivered. So it would be the provider of the service that's subject to the rules as opposed to the coffee shop itself or a hotel.
I've been hearing that there was some clarification in the letter to make clear that in fact it does apply to all kinds of subscribers rather than just service provided to typically consumer type service. Was there anything in the order that?
The clarification was to not who the rules apply to, but who is protected by the rules. And that was the clarification to ensure that schools, libraries, especially those funded by the E-rate program, would be covered by the rules. Not covered by the rules in terms of subject to the rules, but protected by the rules. In other words, as
consumers. So does it protect small businesses then, like a coffee shop or? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Paul?
I guess the whole panel, I'm curious about whether the FCC's recent finding that broadband is not being deployed in a timely and reasonable fashion as per 706, if that creates a changed circumstance in an appeals court, if a court would look at that differently now.
Sure. What you're referring to is Section 706B of the 1996 Act, which directs the Commission to take immediate action to promote broadband deployment if it finds in the mandatory annual review that broadband is being inadequately deployed to all Americans. The Commission did make that finding in July 2010, and that's one of the legal bases relied on in the order. So it's certainly an intervening circumstance that adds to the support for the order.
I just can you give me just a little more guidance on what the Commission does consider an unreasonable discrimination? Is that simply a pretext by which people can bring complaints to you, or do you have some more granular means of determining what's unreasonable or not?
There's specific language that we've included in the item that will define what constitutes unreasonable network management. Generally, if there are practices that are targeted for a specific use, like controlling spam or malware and so forth, that would be reasonable. Without judging what cases might come later, certainly things that appear to be discriminatory would be a red flag.
Okay. Paul, go ahead.
I was just, I'm curious, without having seen the text of the rules, could you elaborate on how paid priority services would be treated? The rules seem to look askance at paid prioritization, but there seems to be this trigger where the FCC would evaluate paid prioritization. Could you elaborate on the mechanisms in the actual order? How that will work?
I think the simplest answer is you'll get the rules shortly, but the rules ban unreasonable discrimination and conclude that pay for priority would most likely be unreasonable. It's a very dynamic marketplace with lots of evolution, so everything will have to be evaluated.
So it's not it's not a given that a paid prioritization service would immediately fall outside of the scope of the rules.
It's not. I think there's significant concern about pay for priority, and it's not that likely that it would be considered reasonable, but it's not ruled out.
Okay.
Lynn?
Could you talk a little bit about how you envision cases being investigated and adjudicated? If someone brings a complaint, I'm just thinking that the average consumer is not going to have access to all the information they would even know to make the case that it's discriminatory, the information about how things are being done by the company.
We have two types of complaint process. The first is the informal complaint, the consumer complaint. You can simply go to our website, the Enforcement Bureau, you file a complaint online, and it's a very informal process. The Enforcement Bureau, in addition to looking individually at complaints, also tracks categories of complaints, the subject matter, the relevant provider, et cetera. And if it sees trends, then it will either launch an investigation based on particular complaints, or it has the authority to launch an investigation on its own motion, as it were. That is the answer to the concern that the average consumer isn't going to know the details. The second form of process is the formal complaint proceeding, and that's what Free Press, for example, invoked against Comcast a few years ago, where they submitted affidavits, they submitted a lengthy complaint, and that is the kind of proceeding that you would see when you have a very well-informed complainant, and either of those, the expectation would be would get you to the same place at the end of the day.
Would you expect that individual consumer complaints would get the same kind, or would you expect them to wait until there was some aggregate number before complaints by individual consumers would really get any action at the Commission?
The Enforcement Bureau would treat them in both ways, individually on their own merits, and, as I said, to look for trends, for indication of widespread. So it would be both approaches.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And I think this concludes today's press conference and concludes today's agenda meeting. Thank you.